The rift in relations between Canada and the United States is being further exposed at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland.
Canada lives because of the United States, remember that.
Canada thrives because we are Canadian.
Canada freaks out after U.S. dependency becomes official. Canada is absolutely in meltdown as its dependency on the U.S. becomes painfully, brutally official. A staggering 75% of its exports flow straight south, leaving the entire nation at Washington's mercy. From defense to trade, every decision, every barrel of oil, every shipment of goods is now shackled to American power, and the panic is spreading like wildfire from Ottawa to every province.
Alberta didn't turn right. Canada went left.
Canada's independence is officially a myth now. Every move, every decision seems to have the United States hovering in the background, shaping outcomes and setting the rules. It's survival under someone else's hand. About 3/4 of everything Canada makes gets sold to the US. That's a leverage, pure and simple. Trade isn't just trade anymore. It's power. And right now, the cards are all in Washington's hands.
The United States was paying for virtually 100% of NATO.
This all came to a head at Davos, Switzerland. Normally, the World Economic Forum is about ideas and economics, but last year it looked more like a battlefield. Donald Trump got on stage for over an hour, and roughly 20 seconds were aimed directly at Canada.
Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your Prime Minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements.
Just 20 seconds. But in those 20 seconds, he made it painfully clear where he sees the balance of power. Canada lives because of the United States, he said. And then, almost like a personal insult, he added, they should be grateful, but they're not. That was it. Simple, brutal, and yet so revealing.
At the end of the day, if Trump decides to take over Alberta, Canada, whatever, we're not going to be able to stop him.
This wasn't just words. The context made it a threat. Trump was building what he called a Golden Dome missile defense system, and Canada is expected to play a role. That's protection, yes, but it's also dependency wrapped in steel. One wrong move, one misstep in diplomacy, and Canada could feel the real consequences.
Certainly sounds like a veiled threat there, Susan, doesn't it? Better watch himself next time he speaks.
Tariffs, Greenland pressure, NATO negotiations. Trump made it clear that gratitude isn't just a feeling. It's policy, it's leverage. Canada's security, its trade, its sovereignty, it all comes with a subtle note. Say thank you or pay the price.
It seems that every day we're reminded that we live in an era of great power rivalry, that the rules-based order is fading, that the strong can do what they can and the weak must suffer what they must.
Mark Carney's response couldn't have been more different. While Trump was shaking the room with ego and threats, Carney stood in the same forum and framed a very different reality. He described a world where the US-led order was no longer reliable, where compliance and polite agreements weren't enough to guarantee safety or prosperity.
It's time to stand up to what Trump is doing rather than flattering him like a lot of world leaders have been doing.
But he didn't stop at theory. Carney moved to action, signaling a subtle, almost fragile rebellion. Canada showed interest in the missile defense system, but under conditions that left the US uneasy, because Trump's personal moods could still shift policy on a whim. At the same time, Canada doubled down on trade with China, seeking a lifeline outside the US sphere, and Carney even sided with Denmark on Greenland, quietly staking out new ground in a high-stakes geopolitical chess game. Every decision was a calculated hedge against the volatility that comes with being so dependent on one neighbor.
That the strongest would exempt themselves when convenient, that trade rules were enforced asymmetrically.
The tension here is undeniable. On one hand, Carney is pragmatic, calculating, and trying to secure Canada's survival in a volatile world. On the other hand, Canada is trapped by sheer economic and geographic reality. 75% of exports flowing to the US isn't just a figure, it's a constraint.
And we largely avoided calling out the gaps between rhetoric and reality. This bargain no longer works.
This fragile rebellion is visible in subtle ways, but the stakes are enormous. Trump's approach mixes personal ego with national power, meaning a slight misstep in gratitude or posture could turn security, trade, or alliances into bargaining chips. Canada's pivot toward China and its strategic support for Denmark are more than diplomacy. They're insurance, an attempt to create options when all the obvious paths are controlled by someone else.
All the United States is asking for is a place called Greenland, where we already had it, as a trustee, but respectfully returned it back to Denmark not long ago.
The whole situation is tense because it's so personal. This isn't abstract geopolitics. It's about who gets to call the shots when the stakes are national security, economic stability, and the very perception of sovereignty. Every decision by Ottawa, every trade move, every statement is under the microscope, not just by the US, but by Canadians watching, trying to understand what independence means when survival relies on the hand of a much larger neighbor.
And the alienation and the abuse, I mean, the federal politicians, they actually think that they can do as they please and that no one will say anything. Well, maybe that's true out in Quebec and Ontario, I'm not sure. But here in Alberta, we're a different breed, we're a different culture.
And it's not just Washington flexing power. Canada is realizing that old assumptions about predictability, reliability, and mutual benefit no longer hold. The rules have changed. Gratitude is now a requirement. Compliance is no longer voluntary. And Carney's efforts, while calculated and clever, are essentially a balancing act on a wire, trying to create options while under constant pressure. Canada's independence might exist on paper, but in practice, every move has to account for US leverage. The reality is stark. The Golden Dome, trade deals, missile defense, Greenland, these are symbols of dependency, not just policy. And while Carney maneuvers carefully, the average Canadian feels the tension in daily life. Energy costs, trade uncertainty, economic volatility. The rules of engagement have changed. And the question isn't whether Canada is independent. Now, it's how it survives when the world's largest neighbor has the power to dictate terms.
That we just witnessed the end of an era in Quebec. That era is not only about François Legault, even though François Legault is the larger part of the CAQ, it's about a political philosophy.
Quebec just pulled the ultimate political mic drop. François Legault resigned days before the provincial election, and let me tell you, this wasn't some polite, I'm stepping aside for fresh ideas kind of thing. No, this was a full-blown collapse of the Quebec First pragmatism that had been holding the province's politics together, and Ottawa, of course, felt it immediately. Quebec was more than just a province. It was a stabilizer. Take that out, and the whole federal balance starts wobbling like a wobbly table at a cheap diner.
He was at, as Nick Nanos just said, somewhere in the 15-18% range in most of the polling. He was lucid and very generous to his party in what he said. And frankly, it was forthrightness that is rare. It's on the accountant side of things. Quebec's got a massive debt right now, a bigger deficit than most provinces, and we're having a heck of a hard time keeping our hospitals going and our schools.
Bills 21 and 96 were front and center in Legault's exit speech, and it wasn't ideology. This was survival. Quebecers are a small nation inside a massive English-speaking continent, and the message was loud and clear. Protect identity, protect language, or risk being swallowed up. The timing couldn't have been worse. Carney was halfway across the world in China, negotiating trade diversification and trying to carve out a lifeline outside the US, when suddenly Quebec threw a political earthquake at him. Canada wasn't leading. It was reacting. Every decision now had to account for the shockwaves bouncing from Montreal straight to Ottawa.
How much abuse can you put up with? That's the message of Albertans. We're so weary of being abused. You know the story of Cinderella? It's a beautiful story because she escaped. That's what's going to happen here.
Meanwhile, Alberta decided to turn the dial up to 11. Grassroots campaigns for independence have been moving fast, collecting signatures and making a very clear point. The West isn't playing nice anymore. Pipelines stalled, energy projects blocked, equalization payments draining the treasury. It's all fueling a sense that Ottawa doesn't listen, and Alberta has the cards. Let's talk numbers. 170 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, pumping around 3.7 million barrels per day, and 97% of it exported straight to the US. That's not just economic power, that's bargaining power wrapped in a cowboy hat. When you combine a rattled Quebec with a defiant Alberta, the federal government is no longer proactive, it's reactive. And that's a scary place to be when you're running a country. Other provinces are watching too, of course. Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and even parts of British Columbia are taking notes. The moment one region openly defies federal authority, a domino effect looms. Suddenly, Canada doesn't feel like a united federation. It feels like a fragile puzzle, and Ottawa is scrambling to keep the pieces from falling off the table. Independence isn't being shouted as ideology in every coffee shop. It's being used as leverage, a strategic hammer to get Ottawa to listen. And the thing is, it's working.
So what we have gotten out of NATO is nothing except to protect Europe from the Soviet Union and now Russia. I mean, we've helped them for so many years. We've never gotten anything, except we pay for NATO. And we paid for many years until I came along. We paid for, in my opinion, 100% of NATO because they weren't paying their bills.
Add the Arctic and Greenland into the mix, and the tension turns almost cinematic. Trump didn't hold back, calling Canada ungrateful and linking gratitude to continental security. Greenland, long returned to Denmark, suddenly becomes the latest geopolitical chess piece. Canada's Arctic sovereignty covers about 40% of its landmass. But here's the kicker. Much of the defense now depends on US military support. That Golden Dome missile defense? Symbolic, yes, but also a very real sign that Canada is paying for its own protection under someone else's rules. And it's not subtle. One tweet, one statement from Washington, and a small decision in the Arctic could cascade into serious strategic consequences. It's like giving someone the keys to your house while they hold a shotgun and saying, "Don't worry, I trust you." The US has the leverage, and Canada's options, while technically existing, are constantly shadowed by that dependency.
So more broadly right now, Quebec politics enters a moment of uncertainty. Coalitions are going to shift, narratives are going to be completely rewritten.
Pour le bien de mon parti et surtout pour le bien du Québec, j'annonce aujourd'hui que je vais quitter mon poste de Premier ministre du Québec.
So, what do we have now? Quebec is shaking the federal core, Alberta is openly flexing its energy muscles, and the Arctic is making it crystal clear that Canada's sovereignty comes with strings attached. Add Trump's personality-driven diplomacy, Carney trying to hedge with China and Greenland, and you've got a country running on nerves and strategy more than policy. Every province, every border, every barrel of oil, every inch of Arctic ice. It's all part of a balancing act where one wrong move could tip the scale.
But it's clear that there's stuff going on behind the scenes here as well that would make an independent Alberta certainly less independent than people think it might be.
Canada isn't just nervous. It's navigating a tightrope over a pit controlled by the US, all while trying to maintain credibility with the rest of the world. And here's the ironic part. Canadians may feel independent, but the reality is that survival in this moment depends on playing the game according to someone else's rules. Quebec's identity battles, Alberta's economic leverage, and the Arctic's fragile security aren't isolated. They're pieces of a larger puzzle showing just how dependent Canada has become, whether anyone wants to admit it or not.
It's a 150-year relationship. We have both benefited and continue to benefit from a trade perspective and a defense perspective and an intelligence perspective for, as I said, for 150 years. And I prefer to think about the importance of our relationship and the interconnectedness of our relationship.
Here's the brutal reality. 75% of Canada's exports go straight to the United States. That's not just a number, it's a straitjacket. Trade dependence isn't abstract anymore. It's policy vulnerability on full display. Every shipment of lumber, every barrel of oil, every container of manufactured goods has an invisible tag, Washington decides. That much leverage in someone else's hands doesn't just influence trade deals. It dictates decisions, shapes national security priorities, and even colors everyday Canadian life.
Are we going to draw conclusions based on reality? Or are we going to keep on telling ourselves stories that we know are not true because we just tested it?
On paper, some things look fine. Quebec, for example, is posting wage growth, tax cuts, and economic numbers that would make any economist smile. But here's the kicker: citizens don't live on spreadsheets. They live in rental units, grocery lines, and on tight monthly budgets. Housing costs, food prices, and the general cost of living are climbing faster than inflation charts can track. No matter how rosy a provincial report looks, people are feeling squeezed. And when people feel squeezed, political stability cracks. And that's exactly what's happening now.
If there is a war, much of the action will take place on that piece of ice. Think of it. Those missiles would be flying right over the center of that piece of ice. All we want from Denmark for national and international security and to keep our very energetic and dangerous potential enemies at bay is this land on which we're going to build the greatest golden dome ever built.
This economic fragility feeds right into the US's hands. Tariffs, trade threats, even defense arrangements become subtle, or sometimes not so subtle, weapons. Canada isn't just negotiating with another country, it's negotiating with a neighbor that can quite literally turn off the spigot on key goods or security guarantees. And while Carney and Ottawa are trying to hedge by trading with China and seeking diversification, there's a catch. Domestic instability makes those global maneuvers far less effective. You can't play the global chessboard when half your own provinces are staring daggers at you. The scenarios are as dramatic as they sound. Quebec could accelerate referendum talk, quietly but steadily pushing momentum towards separation. Federal-provincial coordination could collapse entirely because no one trusts anyone to move first. Markets could start pricing in political risk, nudging capital away or demanding higher costs for investment. And global partners, countries that Canada counts on for trade, security, and diplomacy, might start hedging, politely at first, and then permanently. It's not just theory, it's a chain reaction waiting to happen.
In more than just a little bit, I think they're deeply concerning to not only Canada, which is Greenland's closest geographic neighbor, but as well as Denmark and NATO countries, Europe.
And yet, through all this, ordinary Canadians are caught in the middle. Every policy fight, every tariff threat, every provincial protest isn't abstract. It affects whether groceries stay affordable, whether housing is attainable, whether energy costs explode or remain manageable. The US's leverage isn't just a geopolitical fact, it's a lived reality for millions of people. Gratitude, complacency, or denial won't protect them. Survival in this landscape requires strategic agility at every level, from Ottawa to the provinces to individual citizens figuring out how to adapt. The dependency isn't subtle anymore. It's official, explicit, and unavoidable. Canada's survival depends on navigating this high-wire act, maintaining sovereignty while dependent on a neighbor whose moods can dictate national outcomes. It's a nearly impossible balancing act, but there's no other option. The provinces have power, yes, but their defiance also creates chaos. The federal government has authority, but it's stretched thin across multiple crises. And Trump, unpredictable as ever, is constantly rewriting the rules of engagement.